welcome. This is Kat. If we haven't met yet, I'm Kat Trelinos with Ta-Da by Kat, Next Level Staging and Design. I am the president and visionary of our company, and we bring to you experts, creative marketing geniuses in their field every week. And today we are super excited to have an expert in mold, water, and fire remediation. But today we're talking about, because they're all hefty subjects, mold. Very sexy. I know, but we all have a need to know about mold. What is it? What does it look like? How can I prevent it? What types of mold are there? If you're buying, selling, investing, living, dwelling, etc., and or you know someone who is, please share this video. It'll be put up on YouTube in 48 hours. But check it out. We're going to share some great information with you. And without further ado, let me introduce Brian Boone. He is the president of Boone Restoration Technologies. He is an expert in his field. And welcome, Brian. Thank you so much
for joining
me this morning. I know you have a very busy schedule and carved out some time this next 30 minutes or so to share. And that's what it's all about, is sharing so we can empower our listeners and our viewers. So welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you and I chatted before, excuse me, before we went live here, and we've come up with some topics that I think are really going to empower our viewers. And we're going to start off with the Texas laws. And I know you shared with me that there's only a handful of states that have mold laws. Can you share with us about those laws, and particularly here in Texas, and if you can list the other states as well?
Most of the other states are Louisiana, Florida. There's a few others. I think there's one or two up north, and possibly Arizona out west. Texas was actually probably one of the first states to institute the licensing. So you have a licensed mold remediation contractor, which is myself. You have a licensed mold remediation company. You have a licensed mold assessment consultant that goes out, does the testing, draws up the plans, and what we call a protocol, which is what we take to follow in the course of our work.
And let's just share a little bit why that's important. And, you know, many viewers know I come from Southern California, and in quite a few years back, you know, mold was the big thing, and everybody had mold, and insurance companies were going crazy, and who knows if really they were identified properly. I'm just saying, perhaps maybe they weren't, because there, excuse me, there wasn't protocols and licensure, etc. So I'm just conjecturing here, not being the expert, but can you share just a little bit of your insight on why licensure might be a benefit to folks, and especially for those of us in Texas and those other states?
Well, in Texas in particular, you know, there was a full page in one of the newspapers, the Chronicle, I believe, that had a caricature of the mold that ate Houston back in the yes, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was numerous people in this town that went through mold issues where the mold remediation companies were also doing the mold assessment consulting. So they basically were drawing up their own rules.
They were kind of like, drawing their own rules, double dipping. Okay.
Yeah, the Fox Garden Hen House kind of thing.
So it was really bigger and more treacherous than probably was reality. Was that kind of the thing? It was exaggerated?
That was the Wild Wild West, yes.
Wild Wild West. Okay. So then what happened?
Well, the state stepped in and they instituted rules that would, you know, require everyone to, for instance, you know, we have to have a certain amount of insurance. Our workers have to be registered. They have to go through a background check. Same with the mold assessment consultants. They have to have the same similar type of insurances. They you cannot do an assessment and a remediation on the same job if there's any ownership interest in either or both, rather.
Conflict of interest. Okay. So,
Correct.
and I like that. So these states, Texas being one, are making sure that, it's being identified correctly and an accurate assessment for what needs to be done.
Yes.
I like that. Okay, so is there any other nuances? That's pretty much the crux of it in terms of the laws and how it benefits.
Yeah, they've laid out, certain guidelines. The magic number in Texas is if you have 25 square feet, which they call contiguous, of visible mold, then their rules kick in as far as having to have a licensed contractor, having to have a mold assessment consultant, all those aspects come into
So
play.
under 25 square feet, what's the deal with that?
Well, under 25 square feet, it's a little different. If you're a handyman, or if you're in the course of doing your work, you run across some mold issues. If you're the property owner, you don't necessarily have to hire someone to take care of those issues. You can do it yourself.
Perfect. And we're going to talk about that on the last topic, because that's something I just learned from you, is under 25 square feet. So possibly if you can be caught on that, we're going to share some solutions for you if you suspect, a smaller area of maybe a leak or something that's gone on too long. So stay tuned to hear that. Let's talk about our point number 2 that we discussed, and that is your mold assessment consultant. So if you're selling, guys, or buying a home, flipping, investing, et cetera, or just living and renting, and you're going through the process, typically you will have an inspection. It's your right to have a whole home inspection, which they'll inspect everything, roof, foundation, plumbing, HVAC, all of that. If they call out something that is suspect in terms of mold, then they will call a mold assessment consultant licensed in the state of Texas and those other states. Is that correct, Brian?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's typically the way it's going to happen.
Okay. And so would that be 25 square feet or over? They wouldn't call out this mold assessment consultant if it was less than 25 square feet?
No, that doesn't necessarily apply to the home inspectors. Normally, if they see any kind of a problem at all, they're going to want to point it out and put it in their reports.
Okay. Yeah, I know sometimes they scare buyers and sellers because they call out so much, doing their job, and then it's the realtor's job to say, hey, let's pick our battles and so on and so forth. But a realtor may or may not know that 25 square feet or less, they don't need to spend the money on a licensed, mold assessment consultant. They can maybe take care of that themselves. And again, stay tuned for a solution for that. So let's go into, we're going through these topics pretty quickly. Is there anything on that topic, Brian, that I haven't covered or asked you? Is anything else more you'd like to share on the mold assessment consultant?
I think we pretty well covered it, other than, several home inspectors now have their mold assessment consultant licensing, so they can do both.
You mentioned that. So again, if you're a realtor out there, again, seller, flipper, et cetera, you might want to look for an inspection company that has their licensed mold assessment. I know, another question sometimes is with older homes, folks want termite, and many of them have their termite inspection license as well. So if you do suspect, or you have an older home, or you suspect a leak or something that's been aging, you might want to go ahead and seek out an inspection company that is a mold assessment consultant, and they will have a license number. Correct, Brian?
That's correct.
For that. Okay, perfect. So let's talk about, let's go into, what is mold? What does it look like? What should we be looking for or be on the lookout for? so that we can either identify and then bring in a professional, or maybe mitigate and self correct if it's under 25 square feet. What should we be looking for?
Well, you want to look for moisture intrusion problems, either leaky sink, leaky roof, um, any kind of water intrusion onto a building component. There's about 6 different molds that grow on building components typically. You don't really want any of them. They all have different characteristics, and they also, can affect you in different ways.
So let's talk about that, because I know there's been a lot of confusion in that. You hear this black mold. Well, I wonder if it's black mold because that's the mold that, can give you respiratory issues. And, you and I chatted. I've known folks, being in the real estate staging industry that have been ill. One I shared with you within a mobile home, which is like the perfect, breeding bacteria for moisture and mold. So fortunately, I was building them a new home with the company I was with at the time, and they could get out of it, but they were sick. And I shared with you someone on my team who was renting a property and was really feeling, ill effects from her health. From mold. Thank God we got her out of there and got her a new house. Hey, Crystal, if you're watching. But what are the 6 types? How should we identify them? And, sometimes we don't realize there's a leak. So is there some sort of routine that we should be doing? Like, I guess, dig out all that stuff underneath the sink and check for, in the back for water on, every 3 months or something like that, because we may not know, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Anytime you have any kind of a plumbing fixture, you want to check it periodically just to make sure that it's not leaking. Um, that is the biggest issue with mold, is taking care of the moisture. Mold requires the moisture to grow. It's a living organism. It does not die when the moisture goes away. It simply becomes dormant and waits for the moisture to come back, and it can reactivate. A lot of people have issues with their HVAC systems that can cause mold, that can provide enough moisture inside the structure to support mold. Oversized systems out of balance.
So where do we look for that? If we're doing, some preventative maintenance, where can we look, or where should we look, if it's concerning the HVAC system?
If you can purchase small hygrometers that will track and measure the level of relative humidity inside the home.
Really?
Those are always good to keep, just to keep an eye on. You want to make sure that, you're keeping the relative humidity down below 60%.
Right.
Which
even
is
in Houston, huh?
Even in Houston. Yes. Yes.
We love our humidity. It's great for our skin.
That's
but
right.
Not for mold.
And you want to make sure your HVAC system is working correctly, because the function is not only to keep you cool and comfortable, but it's also to dehumidify. So you need to be certain that the HVAC system is properly dehumidifying the air inside the house.
So for those of us with older homes, I mean, my home wasn't built in the 60s, but it's excuse me, close to 20 years old. We don't have like the newer homes, the balancing and all that. It really can't be balanced because of the way it's set up. So is there anything you can retro with an older home to make sure, let's say you get a hydrometer and you test the humidity in the home, it's higher than 60%. What could you do to help that?
You can actually install dehumidifiers into your systems that will help.
Really? So you can retro it into the HVAC system?
I believe so. I'm not an HVAC contractor, but I believe that's what they do. Yes.
Oh, no kidding. Okay, honey, are you listening to this? You might want to do that. That's interesting. I did not know that was something that you could do to prevent that. So you talked about so let's say we identify some mold. You said there's 6 types of molds. Are they all, equal? What are, how do they differentiate?
Well, they all have different characteristics. The one that everybody hears about is Stachybotrys. It's the one that's commonly referred to the black mold. Um, the color of the mold has very little to do with the species. The color, again, it's a living organism. The color is developed by what it's eating. So any
Ah.
mold can be black. But you have the
Oh, okay. So
Stachybotrys.
did you hear that, people? I think that's important because really we all, we don't sit there and study mold, and if we don't have it, we don't think about it. But we all think that black mold is Stachybotrys, he called it. It's not necessarily the deadly mold. It's what the mold is eating. So the mold is a living organism. What is it eating? Is it eating the moisture? Is that what it
No,
likes?
no, it's eating a food source. Like if it's growing on your drywall, it'd be eating the paper off the drywall, wallpaper glue, any number of items inside a home that it can use as a food source. But
Okay, okay. I
um,
need to stop you right here. So then, does that mean that it's not just water that attracts these living organisms of mold? You could just have the type of wallpaper glue it likes?
well, it has to have a food source. Again, it's a living organism, so it needs a food source and it needs water. And
Oh, okay.
like I
So
said,
it can't just have wallpaper, it needs water too.
it needs water.
Water
Yes,
is the
yes.
static component. It has to have water. Okay.
And like I said, if the water goes away, the mold doesn't necessarily die; it just becomes dormant. So, if it's growing in an area and the water source is gone, it'll become dormant. If the water source returns, it will, recolonize.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So that kind of is a perfect segue for the next, few, 7, 8 minutes to talk about. So, let's say that someone, whether selling a house, buying a house, whatever, they have a little leak upstairs, and it's less than 25 square feet, and they fix it and repaint it and so forth. So now the mold is dormant. It's not going to come back unless it gets water again, correct?
That's correct. But again, in Houston, there can oftentimes be enough relative humidity in the air to set it back off.
Back to the humidity. So
Yeah.
we're in danger of having those little uh, guys want to feed more if we have higher than 60% humidity.
Yes.
Even if we were to fix a patch, dry it, paint it, everything's good. If our home is high humidity, it very well could find its food source again.
Yes. As far as cleaning it, if you picture in your mind the mold organism as a tree, when
Okay.
you clean it, you might cut that tree down, but the root system is still in the substrate.
Ah,
And if you've ever tried to cut down a Yupon tree in Houston, if you don't get rid of those roots, it's coming right back.
ah.
Same thing happens with mold. If it's
Okay.
still in the substrate, it can regrow.
Okay,
So,
so and that's definitely that's when we're going to need the mold assessment consultant and you guys to come in and fix it. But
mhm.
let's share with our audience, if they do catch it early, they're checking underneath the sink, they're watching any kind of water intrusion on a regular basis, and they catch it when it's less than 25 square feet or less. What is a good solution, a remediation that a home seller, or home buyer, or homeowner could do themselves for that small of area? In your opinion?
um, well, there's several things you can do. You can, clean it with a antimicrobial solution, detergent solution. If it's in wood, you can lightly, sand it. Of course, all this you would need to be, protecting yourself while you're doing this. You need to be sure you're wearing an N95 mask and some gloves. Um,
Okay, so
you need to be.
let's talk about that. Uh, and why is that from a health perspective? If we were to breathe this without protecting ourselves, or just be in a mold laden area unbeknownst, um, does that go into the respiratory? That's kind of my thought. But you tell me, why do you need to protect yourself? Will it go?
Well, mold is a possible allergen, and if it gets airborne, you're more likely to breathe it. Um, as far as each individual is different,
Sure.
and dosages is different. If and they're sanding it and there's a lot of mold, you're going to have a higher dose than if
Right.
you're just standing there looking at it. So,
Right. Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. So it is a possible allergen, which,
Mhm.
is why some folks that are exposed to it, are feeling, respiratory or, uh, lethargy, just health effects from that.
Correct.
Okay. And I would think,
Mhm.
especially someone maybe with, that has allergies and or asthma, things like that, they're more susceptible to something like that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
typically going to be those with compromised immune systems, or the very young with developing immune systems.
okay. Okay. So beef up those immune systems, zinc and liquid vitamin C. It goes right into the cellular level. Keep those immune systems strong. That's a good preventative, right? Keep things dry. Check
Keep
underneath the
things dry.
sink for any leaks. Now, what about leaks on the exterior of the house? That's not such an issue, right? Because it's outside, like your hose bib, and you got a leak there.
Yeah, as long as it's not like on a brick facade where the moisture can actually be traveling through the brick and entering the house. But
Ah,
that's the
did not
purpose of
know
weep.
that.
That's the purpose of weep holes, is to prevent that from happening.
Oh, okay. And I know, coming from new construction, I know I saw, it's 7 years ago, so when I was with a builder, weep holes, but I'm not sure if they did weep holes back when this was built in the late 90s. So
We've seen them
again,
where they haven't.
what's that?
I
You've
said
seen them
we've
where they
seen
haven't?
some that where they haven't. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So now I'm thinking about our outside bib that we've had leaks before. Honey, check that out. Yeah, we have. I think we purchased, because my husband has issues, and it's helped everyone. It's some sort of a, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, a dehumidifier type of unit that really helps. But I'm very interested in this hydrometer that you speak of, so I'm going to check that out. So if you're
Yeah, it's a
wondering,
hygrometer.
oh, hydrometer,
Hygrometer. Yeah.
not hydrometer, hydrometer. Thank you for correcting me on
Yes.
that. So
And it
if
will
you're
measure relative humidity.
what's that?
It will measure relative humidity.
Relative humidity. So if you're concerned and you want to check out the humidity, this would be a great preventative. Is that a real expensive tool, or relatively
No,
inexpensive?
you can find those for as low as $15.
Oh, okay. Great tool. Yeah, I would suggest everybody, especially if your home is not brand new. The newer homes have balancing and keep the moisture level lower, but it's a challenge when your home is not brand new.
Mhm.
This has been some great information, Brian. I really appreciate you sharing. Is there anything that we have not talked about in terms of what you'd like to share with our viewers out there on mold?
Well, I think we've covered it. I would like to clarify, though, that the 25 square feet is just the threshold that the state has set up. That
Ah,
not to say if you have less than 25 square feet, you don't have a problem. But
ah.
that's just the threshold where their rules kick in.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
So yeah, if you are concerned, and get some professional help. Um, Brian, and I know you guys, and we're going to have Brian back on a future episode just to talk about water, because his company, Boone's Restoration Technologies, covers fire damage, water damage, as well as mold remediation. So, as you can imagine, those are all three very big topics. So we don't have time to cover all of them, with the due respect today. But if folks wanted to get a hold of you for any of your services, Brian, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, our phone number is 281-444-5959, or you can find us on the internet at boonsrestoration.com.
Very good. I'm going to repeat that. And I think Jeff is going to put it in the notes: 281-444-5959. Brian is the president of the company, and he answers his phone. directly, I have to say. I'm sure unless he's out on a job or doing a quote. And folks that are watching, if you know anyone who is a solopreneur, entrepreneur, big business, small business, and would like to share their nuggets of wisdom with our audience, give a shout out to me. We are booking in November and December and have slots open. And we would love for you to be a guest and share your information and give a shout out to your business as we are empowering and enriching lives. Well, not just throughout Houston. We actually have had a guest from Italy, if you're watching, Patrizia, hey, throughout the country and throughout the world. So thank you so much again, Brian. I appreciate you being my guest, and I will.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This has been really informative. And thanks, Crystal, for giving me the idea. We hadn't talked about that sexy topic, a mold, before on our show. So anyway, everybody have a great weekend. And as usual, stay hopeful, stay positive, and stay connected. And we thank you for connecting with us today, and have a super weekend. Bye.